Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Existential Side Quests, where we go down astrological rabbit holes and call it a good time. I'm Kimber,
And I'm Jenna.
and I'm really excited for today's topic. We're continuing off of last week's topic where we were exploring how clients can project onto their astrologers, but this time we're turning it to astrologers, turning on their clients where they're projecting and coming off as overcaring.
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
Perfect. And for today, we're going to be exploring two types of overcaring. The first one, we're going to be talking about projecting helplessness when it's kind of like when the astrologer has a savior complex. So they don't really see their client as having their own autonomy or their own power. And we're going to also talk about a second type of overcaring, which is projecting familiarity onto the client when the astrologer kind of like blurs the boundaries, the professional boundaries of the relationship.
Yeah, and if there's other types of overcaring that you've come across in your own practice, please share those out in the chat or in the comments if you're listening back to the conversation after.
Yeah, we'll try to check back in and
Okay.
give you guys some replies. All
I'm
right, so
super excited about this one because we're going to be talking a little bit about like the savior complex and that over-identification. So do you want to start with the savior complex or the caring as a part of your identity when you're an astrologer?
Yeah, this is a really, really intense topic, and we can look at it through a bunch of different lenses. And one of the things that came up for me when I was first pondering this was the fact that the astrologer-client relationship is very unique. It doesn't clearly, it doesn't parallel anything else really that we see in other types of professional relationships. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, well, if I want to check in on my client and because I know they had something crazy coming up, either a transit or they expressed, I have a surgery date, something like that. And I think to myself, oh, like I'd love to check in with so and just let them know I'm thinking of them and wish them well. But sometimes I want to pause myself and I'm like, that's really nice of you, Jenna, that you're thinking about your client on this special day. But is it appropriate for you to do more than just think about your client?
Right, because it's like your doctor wouldn't necessarily do that. But should we be like doctors or not?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Because it's true. We have medical astrology. So in a way,
That's a whole nother, yeah, exactly. Okay, so into the astrologer who identifies as being caring.
mhm.
What does that look like?
I I've definitely worked with quite a few of them, both on a personal level, on a mentoring level, having friends that are astrologers that are just really overcaring. They just seem to have this like abundance of this water element energy, either in their chart, in their constitution, where they really just want to pour that into you. I feel like a lot of these astrologers will really want to pause and take time and get in touch with a lot of the feelings. It doesn't mean these people aren't technical astrologers too, but the way they're trying to connect with their client is so emotion based. That can almost be, I don't want to say a red flag, it's a beige flag. Like, let's make sure that we're still keeping it professional and not blurring any of these emotional boundaries.
Right. Like there's a difference between caring and then caring too much or kind of like needing your client to be dependent on you. And I do like that you brought up the water placements, which is making me think a little bit about what Jay-Z said in the chat of you have the advantage of checking in on your own transits and sussing out your motivation, where it's not about saying, oh, I don't do this as an astrologer. We're all, especially the different types of over caring that we're going to talk about, we all can do this. It's more like, how are we going to reflect and ask, like, is this something that's showing up in this moment with this client? Because it can also be certain clients that we do this with, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I like that you brought up that some clients were more susceptible to it than others, because if we're going to cast ourselves into this identity of like this nurturing, caring, professional, but still being almost mothering, it's like, well, what type of clients or client relationships would potentially be more susceptible to that type? So for me, when I have a client who I know is older than me and has done so much in their life and they're like at the top of their field, they're super successful, they're not coming to me as more of like an individual that's really like yearning for that emotional connection and that emotional healing, really that nurturing and rejuvenation, that astrology can show us different paths for how our individual unique constitutions would benefit from different types of nurturing. But if I have a client where I'm like, wow, you are just, it's almost like I'm giving them my inner gold. I'm like, look at you, you're at the top of the field. I have so much to learn
Right.
from someone like you. It can be a lot easier to not slip into that pattern of being the overcaring astrologer, because you feel that your client's really confident and competent.
Right. I could see that. So you said water placements. I want to zoom back out to like
Yeah.
different placements that you could see someone like who identifies as a carer, so would want to be extra vigilant. Doesn't mean you can't be an astrologer, but you'd want to just watch out for this coming up during your client session. So water placements I could see, I feel like first house moons as well, or moon in the 10th house.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good one, moon in the 10th house. Like you're bringing your caring, and where's the stage for that nurturing energy to come out in
Right.
the public. Yeah. I wonder too about synastry with water placements. Like I have a Mercury in Cancer. So if I'm giving you this information and I'm giving it to you through this, in this very Cancerian way, where I'm gently delivering the news or delivering it in a way that really validates how you're feeling about it, that can almost get a little bit over caring too. It can take on that, when we talk about like the lower expressions of Cancer, like the over caring mother who doesn't do any, doesn't take any time to love on herself, or the person who is constantly in retreat, really, not wanting to shed that shell of the crab. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, well, I mean, it's still a water placement, but that Pisces, like it's Pisces, Venus, Pisces, I know we talked about Cancer placement as well, but just because I know we talked about Pisces with the client to the
Mhm.
astrologer, but also, I mean, it's not just, it's like Pisces can also be like that savior.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And the fact that Pisces can sometimes blur the boundaries, not
Mm-hmm.
understand where they begin and end and where the other person begins. So it's like, oh, this isn't over caring. This is exactly what you need. It's almost like becoming too enmeshed, too
Oh, yeah.
merged.
I could see that with like a Neptune conjunct moon, or even Neptune on your ascendant. If like, it's like people may come to you or see you as a mystic.
Mhm.
And if you're not able to kind of set that boundary or
Mhm.
acknowledge, like, actually, I can't rescue you.
Yeah.
So I could see that being there too.
It's interesting to think of the axes too. So we're talking about like Cancer being overcaring, and then the opposite of Cancer, the opposite sign being Capricorn, which is still an emotional sign. Every placement, every zodiac sign can have emotions. It can have these different depths and versatilities within them. But Capricorn being like, let's do the work. Like what actually matters here. It's the same with Pisces and that Pisces Virgo axis, and Virgo, being more about service and kind of taking it back to like, well, how can I actually be of service to my client? Not be in this emotionally confusing relationship, but truly be of service.
You're making me think again also about Virgo, like when that service turns into like needy, like being indebted, like that you
Mhm.
need even more, like what you're giving isn't enough, and that I can help more.
Yeah.
I could
We
see
we have a question from Gil. Do you find it harder to establish boundaries when a client is a close friend or family member?
I love that. I
Mhm.
think I really want to touch on that when we're talking about the over identification or projecting familiarity, because I can totally, yes, I don't think it's harder, but I think it's more, you need to be more intentional about it
Mhm.
and be more opportunities to reflect on your own biases with that
Yeah.
person and just be, I think making sure you're asking questions, which kind of brings me to the book I brought up last week, but Tracy Marks again, like the art of chart interpretation in her in the section of astrology as a counseling tool. There's some really good questions that she's like everyone should be asking themselves these questions when they're practicing astrology, just to kind of see how am I showing up, what's currently influencing the way that I am an astrologer. And specifically, we have do you, because of your urge to be needed or to have value as a helper, encourage the dependency of your clients? And then also, like, being able, like, are you not letting your client like outperform their existing lived experiences. So it's like when you have a lot of background knowledge, like if you, like you said, if you know what their job is outside of this session, and that might influence like how you show up and whether they need more or less from you. And so kind of like checking, am I letting that inform how I'm gonna give them a reading too much?
Yeah, I really like that first question that she phrased, because what it's also alluding to is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So if you're an astrologer that has a lot of intrinsic motivation, meaning that you get a lot of internal satisfaction, such as feeling like you've made a difference, then I think you are more susceptible to these kind of emotion boundaries being blurred. Whereas extrinsic motivation, like your client paying you, like them leaving you a review, things like that, those, I think, as long as you have good pillars in place to support that external motivation, external, satisfaction, I think you could potentially be less susceptible to the intrinsic taking over.
Yeah, that's really interesting because when you were saying that too, I think like that caring as identity, it's bringing me to those moon Jupiter placements as well, where there's a conjunction or opposition where we want to just, we want to take care, we want to be caring or like help someone. Because there was a follow-up question to that dependency of your clients, but do you prefer that they rely upon your advice rather than turn to themselves and learn to trust their own guidance? And that made me think of something else where, how does it look if you are caring, like if caring is a part of your identity, or if we are struggling with like projecting ourselves as a hero to our clients, what might be happening or going on in a session, or what happens to the relationship between the astrologer and the client?
Yeah, like if you're not allowing your client their full free will to make their own decisions, come to their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially with what Gil had brought up about when it's a friend or a family member, it might be even harder because you're invested in this person, you like this person, you have a relationship, you want to make sure. Oh well, you don't really understand what I'm saying about how you could be using Mercury to help your Pluto. Let me do it all for you. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's interesting to think of that like friend and family member being more susceptible to it too, because who are the majority of people that we give free
You
readings
practice,
to?
yes.
Yeah, and so you're practicing, you're not getting that professional setup because you're not charging, you're being casual, you're doing it on a whim. You're much more available to these people. I'm sure you have this too, Kimber, when a friend reaches out, what's going on in my chart right now? I'm having a bad day.
So quick, yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, it's hard not to go and look. It's like, where do our professional boundaries, when it's not a professional relationship, where do they come into play? And we're right back at Pisces. Where are the boundaries here? So,
right.
yeah.
I also feel like with whenever caring is part of that identity, that we can be, we as in a collective, we as astrologers, it just kind of possessive or not really like, if you are wanting to take care of this person, not like, I think Andy brought it up last week, but how sometimes it makes sense for a client to turn into a student of astrology, or there are things that they want from astrology that we are not trained in, or that's not our specific like practice in astrology, or they need something that they can get from therapy or from a doctor. And just when we start to feel like this sense of caring that is like crossing the line, it's almost like a inflated sense of responsibility that can kind of show up as, we can handle this, or like this is our thing, and not really thinking about like, actually I think it makes more sense for you to like connect with this astrologer or for this person. And I can see that with what Gil is saying, of just, if you are having a hard time with setting those boundaries, it's possible to do so, but if you are, that would be a great opportunity to connect that person with another astrologer.
Definitely. I had a reading recently where I'm not going to go into any specifics, so this is not blurring any violations of boundaries or anonymity. My client couldn't figure out how to get on Zoom and asked me, could you please just monologue for the reading and send it to me, and then I will listen to it. I'll download it. I'll figure it out. I'll listen to it. And yep, sure, that's great. So we did that, and then I was like, please let me know any feedback. And the opening feedback was, you didn't really talk about anything health related or medical. And I said, well, I'm not a medical astrologer. I mean, we can go there
But
on a
this wasn't a medical astrology consultation either.
right, exactly. And it's like, honestly, it would be nice to know ahead of time if that's more what you're looking for, so that I can talk about, the planets or the signs and their affiliations, or how things could be presenting. How is the energy expressing itself in a more medical way, or a health and wellness kind of way.
Yeah.
But,
no,
yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I did do the referral thing. I said, well, that's not really my
right.
specialty.
That's why it's also so important as an astrologer to be in communities with other astrologers or in other like healing professions and practices, because you then know people that you like. Having a network makes it a lot easier to be able to refer people out.
Yeah.
And
That's
I mean,
so
yeah.
true. And for keeping the caring in check.
Yes. And yes, because I think too, when I first started practicing professionally, and you do start with like, your family and friends, that it was really helpful for me to, I saw something in a chart, but I was like, I want to kind of like check my thinking, and like having that like sacred space with like another astrologer of like, am I projecting, if you're not sure if you are. And it was always like a for me like, okay, wait, they're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, and I'm not projecting, or like, this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're able to see it multiple times over in a chart, I feel like that's it's not as accurate, because if you're biased, your bias is probably going to follow all the way through. But I feel like when the theme repeats itself, it's almost like you can trust yourself a little bit more with the go ahead that
right,
you're not being just biased here. Yeah.
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 What about I was thinking about in the session when we are also over caring, how much that affects our ability to give the inner gold back, kind of referring back to last week.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is that they're leaving with more agency and like clarity about their direction they're going in life, or what, like giving them almost homework after the session to think through, and like asking them questions that they need to sit with.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when we're over caring, sometimes we take up a lot more space in that conversation that should be internal. Like we should really be facilitating that individual self-direction. Like even in astrological remediation, it's that the client can come up with a list of things that might be helpful. Like we're able to help think through, here are the type of things that would be good symbolic substitutions.
Mm-hmm.
But you also know yourself, and so thinking of, if Venus needs beauty or needs communion and bonding, what are things that represent that for you in your life, and like coming up with those, instead of we're like, you need to do these two things and this is the only thing, instead of being like, oh, you can actually brainstorm some.
Mm-hmm. And having the ability to pivot. I had a client once who I was really honing in on her moon being in an earth sign and being in the sixth house, and talking about routines in her life and how meaningful they've been, how much structure and peace they bring to her. And how much healing there is available to someone with that type of a moon placement. And I was losing her. I could tell she was glazed over. I could tell that the information I knew it was accurate, but because I knew this person, and we had similar social circles, some similarities, but I was like, I need to pivot. This person is not hearing me. So this moon was trining a Venus in the second house in an earth sign. And I was like, maybe this is a way in. I was like, tell me about who this is. Who is this loving person who gives you this sense of I am enough, this second house sense of I deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
And my client immediately melted. I could see that this was the path, and this was how they wanted to enter into this vulnerable healing journey. And in a way, if I had been an astrologer that, in that client, because I don't want to say I never don't care too much, but I wanted to make sure that this person was benefiting from all the wisdom that this moon was sharing, but they couldn't connect with it. So I had to go a route that I saw as not quite as powerful, but it ended up really informing me and informing our work together.
That's really cool. That's because I think that also is like the the power of asking questions
Mm-hmm.
instead of just giving it off as like an absolute truth really helps to invite the client in and like to kind of bring down that projection
Mm-hmm.
of it, because especially like with eighth house planets, it's like just, you know, what is your experience with death, instead of just like assuming, oh, there's a fear around death or something like that. Just where we can, especially when we see themes repeating, it's so easy to kind of go to like the far extreme. And it's like, yes, that's a possibility, but what other possibilities are there? And like keeping it open-ended when we're going into a reading of the
Mm-hmm.
different ways that it can show up, right? Like so
Yeah.
that the client's lived experience has room to help inform the path of the reading. Like I see that a lot with people with third house stelliums of third house. So voice, communication, those are going to be big themes in their lives, but we don't know how they're using their voice right now. We don't know like it. I think you can be a photographer, you could be a writer, you could be singing. Are you singing publicly? Are you singing in the shower? Like just being open to, okay, we know voice is a thing, but we don't know if that's like an out loud voice or on paper or something else. And just understanding like we have a whole new human. Not every third house stellium is the exact same, not just because there's different signs or different planets in it, but
Mm-hmm.
because we're different humans with like when we believe in free will.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit last week when we were saying how like the physical manifestation, the behavioral manifestations of planets, always the hardest to nail down because we just simply can't, there's so much free will. There's infinite possibilities on how that third house stellium could play out. So what we want to do is present the spiritual question. What is it that voice means for you, for your soul's evolution, for your development? Jay-Z's in the chat. Hey, Jay-Z, he said, it's all about the inquiry. And it seems like that's why that monologue recording with my client might not have been the topic for what they wanted. That's so true. And had we been together and she kind of steered the boat a little bit in that direction at the beginning, it would have been a completely different reading for her. And it, you know,
Right.
it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, medical astrology, I feel like definitely benefits from like a dialogue, so that we can be informed by what the client's experiencing. I think
Mm-hmm.
too, there was another question in the book that was like, does your desire for attention lead you to do all the talking in a session? Sometimes the questions are pretty like, oh, let me check myself. So, but do you show off your expertise rather than tune into the needs of the other person and continually assess whether you are responding to them? And it made me think about what you were just saying with that previous client of you could tell you were losing her.
Mm-hmm.
And like so then you were like, okay, let me pivot and ask that this another way, and like really being open to what does the client need, and what the client needs can change, especially with our clients that we continue to connect with and like meet with. Like they ideally are evolving, and so they're going to show up differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so like
Definitely.
you can't just be like, oh, I'm meeting with this person again and it's gonna be exactly like the last time. And no, it's honestly like more challenging, I think, to just continue meeting and making sure that it's like I'm not keeping you stagnant. I want to make sure that I'm like matching your pace with your own evolution.
That matching your pace with your own evolution, that's beautiful. Because I was going to say the transits, you're never going to have the same reading simply
Yeah.
because of the transits. Yeah. So what is the energy in the universe pushing you to talk about? What is the energy in the universe pushing your client to be focusing on at that moment? It's going to be different whenever I have a client that needs to reschedule. I'm always the universe wanted us to focus on something else that for whatever reason wasn't going to be available at
Right.
our initial appointment. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Andy's saying questions are great in a reading. There could be a formula, content, question, content. I like that a lot.
Right. And
Yeah.
then I like to do that too. I mean, I'm a Libra rising. And so I think that one-on-one dialogue is just my ideal type of reading. But some people like to process like silently or just really listen. And so they're not going to just share out or like I say, please interrupt. And if they may not feel comfortable interrupting and asking those questions. So just making that time, like there's a couple just open moments in your reading where you have like just pause and be like, okay, how does that feel? Like, do you have any questions? What's coming up? Like just kind of having these set opportunities to really hear from the client and to see what's going on is really helpful too.
Oh, for sure. I really like that. Yeah. And I think framing it well at the beginning, like So this is meant to be a conversation, or feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is your time too. This is about you. This is about your growth. It's not about my ego getting inflated. So,
Right.
yeah, I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Awesome. So, what if we were going to talk about the other type of overcaring? So
Yes.
when we're projecting that familiarity or over identifying with our client.
Mm-hmm. This kind of goes back to what Gil was saying, but I feel I would want to look at the synastry. I think certain synastry can also influence this, but this is different because it's not, I think caring as like I am a caring person is very ego driven, and projecting familiarity is not necessarily about your ego or like what your view of self is. It's that there's just, oh, I recognize this, whether it's something about myself or it's someone like, oh, this person reminds me of my mom, or this person reminds me of my brother or something like that, and just kind of making sure we're not putting this new person in that other person's story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because we can go ahead and define too what even familiarity is. Does it
Yeah.
mean the chart looks the same? Does it mean the person looks similar to that person?
Ooh, yeah, there's so many different ways. Yeah, let's go ahead and name that, because I feel like there's so many types of familiarity.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if it's someone that you've never met and it's a client, whether it's a referral or just someone that reaches
Mhm.
out, so the first real snapshot of them, the first visual other than their written email, is going to be the chart. You're going to
Yeah.
see their chart. You're going to, and then that's going to come to life before you have, the body, the actual person, their mannerisms and all that. So if I see a chart and I see something that looks familiar, oh, you have a Pisces stellium? My daughter has a Pisces stellium. My mind kind of, I have to pause and be like, this isn't your daughter though. Like, don't
Right.
assume that Pisces stellium, the way she shows up is going to be the way this person shows up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially with Pisces too, because of that projection, like just making sure that you're checking on that. So,
Yeah.
okay. So then I think I see that too. And also, or it's like if they have a placement that matches yours, where it's like, oh, my son's conjunct their moon. And what does that mean for the reading? And just kind of like, or if you see like, oh, this chart looks a lot like my own, what does that mean? And just making sure that we're not doing that.
I gotta say, I can't help but mention things sometimes to clients. Like if I have someone that has some amazing placement that I also have in my chart and we get talking about it, I will usually I need to take a minute and it's in the moment that I'm like, is this actually going to help them or is this going to throw it off? Is this going to be something that it's going to benefit them to know I also have a Gemini moon that's out of bounds? Are they going to feel a level of comfort with that? Or is that just going to like be like, oh, like, why did I need to know that?
I'm actually interested what people in the chat are thinking about. Would you like when your astrologer shares that they have something in common, or do you prefer that they focus simply on like your chart?
Mm.
I agree. I think it really depends on the like knowing, feeling the client's vibe, and if it makes sense. Like especially like let's say they're an Aquarius and I have an Aquarius stellium, and there is like some like resistance to like the Aquarius's like evolutionary path of like, oh, I don't want to be different. It's like you can, different does not mean outcast, or like different doesn't like, different means being authentic and true to yourself, not just blending with the crowd. But I think just when you are get going overboard or over caring with that familiarity is when you are talking more about yourself or your experience. Like you are now taking up too much space in this conversation. Where are we actually talking about the chart and then this person? Are we asking questions about their own life, or are we sharing more about ours?
Yeah. That
Mhm.
that brings me to where we started this conversation, was like the astrologer client relationship is so unique. No wonder we have all these, questions about boundaries and projecting and overcaring and what is too much. And it's like, but this really, I think, mirrors traditional therapy, where it's like, if your therapist is talking to you about their life, like, you're not getting therapy. This is inappropriate. You're supposed to essentially, your therapist should know more about you than you know about your therapist, at least on a personal level.
Yes. And there's like a balance, because I remember, you want to ask, I feel weird if my therapist asks how my holiday was and I don't ask about theirs, but it's like we just don't spend as much time on it. And that can be that can, I mean, maybe that's also the Libra in me, but just I want to make sure that there's enough time. But in these situations, it's supposed to be, if I'm the client versus the astrologer, like the amount of time we're spending should be predominantly on the client, because they're
Mhm.
paying this time and we don't go over in that time. Another thing you were making, another type of familiarity I see is when transits, like when we remember either hard transits we've gone through, it's like, oh, they have Pluto coming up to their moon. And if you've had that experience, or also like, what am I trying to say? When, oh, if they're going through like a big transitional life experience that you've been through, or that you've had like clients who have also been through them, and making sure that we're not just like projecting our own experience onto them.
Mm, that's such a good, and that actually, the reverse side of it is approach confidently when someone's going through a transit that you haven't gone through
Yeah,
or won't go through.
right.
Yeah, there was a time when I was in my mid-30s where I kept getting clients that were in their Chiron returns, and I was like,
Mhm.
"This is a 51-year-old, experience that I have not experienced, and I'm counseling all these people who randomly just came through the pipeline." But again, maybe I would have brought more bias to it had I been like, "Well, during mine, it's like this, therefore it's like this."
Mhm.
But to
Yeah.
see it with fresh eyes that are so fresh that I don't even have a personal experience with it. Yeah,
Yeah. Totally see that.
definitely brings something different to the table. I think one of the trickiest, of course, the luminaries touching each other, things like that, but nodal activations, the synastry there, I, oof,
Can
it's
we
go
can
ahead.
we explain that, since we're both evolutionary astrologers, and so if
Mhm.
anyone else is an astrologer that does not use nodes, why do we care so much about nodal synastry?
That's such a okay, yes. Okay, so in evolutionary astrology, the type of astrology that Kimber and I both practice, we are looking at the soul's purpose for growth in this lifetime. And when we see the south node of the moon, that's talking about
Yeah.
what we're here to remedy, those habits from past life called karma, how we showed up in the world before and what's echoing forward in an emotional way. And then the north node is representing where we're heading in this lifetime, what we're trying to take the gifts of the past, what we came in with, and blend it with the goals of the future to kind of the alchemy of the balance there.
So it's because depending on, like, if your moon is on my south node,
Mhm.
what would that say about the potential in that astrologer client relationship?
So then if it's my south node, so this is energy I'm familiar with, it reminds me of home in certain ways. It's my go-to, my default right there. So then if someone comes to me and has their moon right there with my default, it follows similar principles of just basic astrology where we're talking about a fusion. So that fusion of the conjunction of moon and south node is saying this person's lunar energy and my south node, they match, they know each other. And a way to frame that is this person's moon energy resembles moon energy that I was familiar with in this past life.
Yeah.
Then it can get into this tricky situation of, okay, so moon mother, were you my mom in a past life? Like we can go right,
Yeah.
you can go to anywhere with that, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
No.
it's that familiarity that can blur the boundaries and almost, excite projection, make it happen more.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
could see that.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider the composite chart when like reflecting on the risk for over identification between an astrologer and their client?
It's funny because no, I've looked at them, but synastry for me is really where it's at because in the composite chart, I like to look at the composite chart as like, what is this relationship? What is our work together? What is the highest expression of our work together? Is it that I'm gonna, we're gonna shoot for the stars and together we're actually gonna make these grand revelations together, or is it more, you know closed off and nurture. Okay, we're going to actually touch into things and feel into them. And this is going to be a very emotional space. So we need to have good containership around that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the composite chart that tells you how we can best work together. But for me, at least, the way I've used it as far as projections and identity go, I'm all about the synastry. What
Yeah,
about you?
I can see that with synastry for sure. I also feel like if you transpose a lot of planets into that person's first house, it's like you might be really clear on what their path is supposed to be. And I feel like that there could be a risk of maybe holding on to their gold, or like not giving them authority at the end of a session, or feeling like, I'm helping you, like you need me. I could totally see that.
Yeah, yeah. And the idea of over identifying there too, where it's like, well, I've already done this, so let's just follow my lead. Like I'm the expert. I'm paid here for a reason. Like when all that like ego in the unhealthy sense of the word comes through, and it really, then the client's more concerned with boundaries rather than their actual growth. So
Right. See that.
it can happen for sure. We were going to talk a little bit about attachment styles too. I wanted to bring that up because some of the work that I do, a lot of the work that I do in the adoptee community, the trafficked, displaced, and adopted community, is we're talking about deep trauma from early childhood, synastry in a way of meeting people that, if you're in reunion later in life, these are people that the relationship feels potentially very different than it would have felt if you had grown up knowing your mother, knowing your father, knowing your siblings. So the amount of sensitivity and the predisposition to have projections going on in that space, because this is a shared trauma that we're trying to pull apart and really emotionally work through there. And where this is a trauma that happened during childhood, during pre-verbal for a lot of people, attachment styles and attachment dysfunction can be part of that package. So then when we're talking about over identifying or over caring or over nurturing, what we're talking about is an inappropriate attachment. So then if you're either an astrologer who's had some early childhood developmental trauma, or your client is, then the attachment style that you have as an adult can definitely show you where the potential hazards are on that client astrologer relationship timeline.
And how would you recommend someone be, like, if someone's not new to attachment style, like, would you consider anything in their chart, or just that they are asking themselves certain questions about like how they might show up?
I think it's really it's incredibly beneficial to know your attachment style, like whether you do have a secure attachment and therefore are potentially less susceptible to the overcaring or projections or over familiarity, all the way down to like a very disorganized attachment style where it feels like almost like potentially an out of body experience, like you can't quite decipher your own reactions or the way that you're bonding with not just your clients but everyone in your life. So being able to figure out, where do I fall on within the realm of these different attachment styles, so that I can potentially watch for the red flags of that. So for me, with early childhood trauma, I would be classified as someone who has a disorganized attachment style. So knowing for me my triggers about like, oh, like I need to have good rituals around releasing the energy of my clients at the end of the session. Otherwise, I will hold on to whatever it is that we talked about. I'll be worried about them, essentially sending them loving, caring energy, but not moving on with my day. And even if that's something that's more energetically experienced, rather than me being like, hey, how you doing? Oh, how was your surgery? Hey, it's me again. Your astrologer you met for 90 minutes and I can't get away from me now. That's never happened. Don't worry. But that energy could certainly, come up if I am not, in some sort of ritualistic way, releasing myself of this relationship and the potential in my mind to grow it in a direction that isn't actually benefiting us.
You're making me think too, like anxious attachment, and I'm going back to the transits a little bit. Like if you a lot of times there's an anxious attachment because there's like you are trying to fill this void, like you didn't get your needs met at one point, and so you want to feel like you are wanted or needed. And so I think, I mean, if you can see if there's a predisposition in your natal chart for some of these things, but also if you, let's say you went through a rough transit that you see in another person's chart, but you weren't supported during that transit, like you might have a certain, like your typical attachment style, but then I feel like you can still morph into, maybe you aren't an anxious attachment style all the time, but then you see that Pluto transit that reminds you of a time when no one was there to help you through it, and then now you're seeing it in this client's chart, and there's this, you can kind of shift into like an anxious attachment mode of like, well, I want to make sure they get what I didn't get, or it's like almost like an opportunity, or if I was self-abandoning and not showing up for myself during my own Pluto transit, maybe this is like it can become a self-serving opportunity if we're not careful, where this client is serving as like a stand-in for ourselves to redo that situation and give them what we didn't have if we're not careful. Like, and so just like, and kind of reflecting on, like, I love the book Attached, that goes through attachment styles, and just seeing like, I've read that and I can see myself in different types of attachment styles, like just depending on like certain events in our lives will shift things even in our adulthood.
Mm-hmm. I have that book right over there. I'm like, oh,
Is that what you were looking at?
yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, the force is with me. I want to
I
show.
did on the front page, and so you trying to like pull it in is funny.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll link it later. But yeah, that's an excellent resource. I feel like attachment styles is something that, whether you're an astrologer or not, like it's just more information about yourself. Maybe my Gemini moon is showing, but knowing is power.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Jay-Z is asking, do you believe that people can change attachment styles?
I think we should read that book, but I do like that I think you can, what do you call it? Remediate
Mm.
your attachment style. Like there are definitely like anecdotes to it. And
Mm-hmm.
also being cognizant of your attachment style, because I know there are protest behaviors in all of them. And so like I know for anxious, it's just if you might do the thing that's opposite of what you want, where it's like you might walk out of a room because you want someone to follow you, and it's like there's a different way to get that, like what's the actual need underneath it. But I think sometimes when we focus more on like, oh, I don't want to be this anymore, then we're so focused on that versus the actual issue is your needs under the attachment style. Is like the need under all of them is to feel connected in a way that's comfortable for you, and focusing on that versus like, I don't like my attachment style. No one wants to hear they have an attachment style that's different than secure,
Yeah,
right? Get
right.
so on that, then we're kind of missing the point.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. I think that, in change is the only constant, that type of philosophical way. Yes, you can change your attachment style. The amount of work, the amount of emotional labor, and recognizing that it's not a linear thing. Like for me, I was diagnosed with personality issues that stem from attachment disorders and
Mhm.
disorganized attachment. And then as I moved through different therapy programs and just had different experiences, did my shadow work, entered my Pluto square, had all these amazing transits and opportunities to heal, I can see myself having a more organized, basically, attachment style. However, being aware of it and then watching myself during either vulnerable times, high risk situations, triggers from the past, seeing it creep in and being like, oh, I'm doing that behavior. I'm responding to this in that old way that very much is clearly ingrained in me. This is something that I formed while the neurotransmitters in my brain were coming together. It's very difficult to retrain that type of brain connection and brain chemistry. And seeing those behaviors come up again, it's like, okay, well, I'm just more vulnerable right now. Whether there's something hitting something in my chart in the sky, whether it's an old relationship that's come back, whether I'm being, especially demanded of by my family, something like that. And recognizing that, not all is lost just because you see a regression or you see this relapse of behavior.
Yeah, I can see that.
Jay-Z just said, and maybe it's as you said, Kimber, your current attachment style is a manifestation of the transit of a slow-moving planet. I
Mm-hmm.
like that a lot.
I think there were two things that just popped in my head, so I might be like going around, but I was thinking about another type of overcaring that can come off as it's not undercaring, but it can be like we're showing up, we're dimming ourselves a little bit as astrologers too much when it's more, and I can see this with anxious or disorganized, where if we're not, because like I said, some people are silent processors, or like not going to be as like one-on-one, needing that dialogue back and forth. And if that's what you're coming in and like expecting, and that's not what they're doing, there can be this like anxiety that builds up, or this anxious attachment, like you're trying to get connection or warrant something, where we might do it in like the wrong way, where we might just censor ourselves, or try and see like, okay, maybe they're not in getting what they need from this reading, and focusing, it's like we care about the client experience, but to the point that we are not actually giving them what they need in that reading, if that makes, or like kind of sugarcoating or kind of glossing over some like hard transits, or maybe there's more than one heavy transit, or there like, but then depending on how that converse, especially I think as you are an astrologer, like practicing professionally, you get more comfortable with like some of those hard moments or conversations that need to happen, or like how to address them. But at the beginning, when you get into a hard moment or conversation, and it's like, oh, that like, obviously some things are kind of like hard for us to process as a client, it's like, that was kind of sticky, but we got through it. But maybe I won't go through these other two things that are kind of sticky, because I didn't like how that felt.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, there's a point where it's like, is this stickiness actually happening, or is this stickiness something that I just am not a sticky person, so I'm not used to how sticky this is, but to them, this is not sticky at all. One
Right.
of the things that I like to do at the right before a reading, this is like from the secret toolbox of Jenna,
Mm-hmm.
is I have this slide that was given to me by one of my old mentor tutors years ago, and it has all the different rising signs and exactly how to show up for that client. Like, I recently had a Taurus rising client. It says, be pragmatic, be straightforward, really like calm, cool, and collected, deliver the information, don't overspeak it. And I was like, yep, that's right. But then also it tells you how your client's going to show up. So if I have a client that's, an energy, I have no Taurus placement. So to see a client that has heavy Taurus, I'm like, Jenna, this is going to feel different. This person is going to affirm you, but in ways that aren't going to be like, oh, you're so right, because blah, 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 blah. Like, it's going to be calm, and there will be the affirmation there, but they might not necessarily want to say anything more than, yup. So,
Right.
yeah.
See that.
And not taking that to the chin when they don't want to elaborate. Yep.
So many things are coming up. No, that's good.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Trying to remember what the other thing I wanted to bring up was. I'm
trying to read your mind.
Oh, it was back with the over identification, but just because I know someone's like, well, what if I think my partner actually asked this question to me. It was like an existential, and was like, if all of us are, if there's like all these babies in a hospital that are born at the exact same time in the same place, they have the same chart. And like, because I think over identification definitely connects strongly with synastry, but it made me just think about like, yes, but they're born to different parents with different charts, and they're like, and we also, which we're going to talk a little bit about next week with the archetypes, but archetypes are not flattened stereotypes, where Aquariuses can show up as like, there's so many different ways that can be expressed and still be very Aquarian. And so, but I feel like you still are shaped by your environment and like your free will, but also like the access to being able to make certain decisions. Like, not everyone has those things. And so those are the things that shape you. And we can go through the exact same experiences. Like, me and my siblings, we lived in the same house growing up, went through the same exact things, but we like dealt with them and coped with them differently because we're different people. And it's just, I think, like, I think about my close friend. We've been friends for 20 years. I know her so well, but we were born 17 days apart. And so our charts are very similar, but they're in different houses. And there's just like it's one of those things where we can kind of like fill in the blanks about a person instead of like the open-endedness of the chart, because we're like, oh, this is just like my chart, or there's a lot of similarities here, you know?
I do know what you mean. And it's interesting. I think about this often, the idea of like these generations, these clusters of children. So, and you would know from your old profession, like when you
Yeah.
see a group of kids that were born in 1995 and then 1996 and 1997. I have a cousin who was a teacher for, I mean, she's in her 50s, so 30-ish years. She's still a teacher. And she told me once, she was like, oh, I had a really hard class this year. And for whatever reason, that like the way she said it just stuck with me, because I'm like, isn't everyone unique individual? But I was early 20s, but now I think back to that comment she made so often, because I'm like, I wonder what it was. There was something in their charts and the sky, just the energy of that class born in 2000 whatever, that was challenging for her. And whatever it was, a slow moving planet, a Jupiter placement, something must have been coming in on her chart in such a way that it was felt compounding. Having, she does pre-K, so having like all these 4-year-olds that had this like specific placement right around her. Yeah.
No.
You could probably speak to it more than me, though.
No, yes. I used to teach in another life.
Another life. I love that. Yes. Yeah, it's funny because I sort of taught. I went to school for it and then switched my major, and then I was a homeschool mom. So teaching the homeschool groups, it's obviously very different than being a professional teacher, but seeing the energy of the kids, we had blended classrooms. So the energy that ended up coming out was transitory energy a lot of the time. Like whenever we weren't even in an astrological co-op. I don't know if those exist. If they do, please let me know. But we would see all the kids acting wild, and I'd come in with like, well, the moon is void of course, and Mars just entered a fire sign today. And everyone's like, well, that's really interesting, but none of my students are listening. So tell me what I should be doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like what Andy said in the chat. I agree with monologue. Yeah, trying to fill a whole hour with a client is a challenge, because I want it to be informed by like where they're at in their journey too.
Yeah.
It makes me think too, like, about the transits on the day of the session, because something that when you were talking about teaching children and we're talking about caring too much, that different clients do need different levels of care sometimes, or like especially if you're in the middle of like some heavy transits, or like some people are coming because they're curious about a reading, some people are dealing with a specific issue, or it's an issue that they've been dealing with for a long time, and like they're like this is a last resort, which can feel very like intense and heavy. And so I don't want to say that what's over caring for one person isn't over caring for another, like where care is important. We do not want to be like detached or like kind of talking about something heavy in a person's chart without empathy, right? And just like, it's just, the goal is that even if we start like we're meeting a person where they're at and like in their chart, and that we're able to kind of scaffold, that's a teaching phrase, but it's like scaffold the care. So it's still focused on caring as a way to get them to feel more empowered and like having this self-direction and agency, not caring to where they're becoming more and more dependent on us and like more doubtful of their ability to like lead their own life.
Yeah. It's a reason why when I get a client and the most I'll do is like, let's do 3 sessions. Let's get you scheduled for 3 sessions, because anything beyond that, you might not be finding value anymore. Like you might actually be ready to take whatever it is that we reflected on, that the epiphanies that we had, the insights, the new lenses for looking at things, and actually implement that new way of thinking or acting or behaving in your life. So having another session so soon can almost feel like, well, I'm just reiterating the same stuff. But Yeah.
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 And I love that.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
would you think like if the moon is like on a planet, there's the transit moon, which is, it moves very fast, but on the day that you're meeting, like, do you think that would influence anything around
Yes, absolutely.
of caring?
Yeah, I don't look at transits when I offer times and dates. I
Yeah,
simply look because I want the universe to decide.
I agree.
And
But do you check them out after it's been scheduled?
after it's been scheduled, usually morning of,
Yeah.
because we're in the energy. We're literally swimming in it. So I'm like, all right, I feel it. Let's look at it. Oh, this is how it's showing up. I see exactly what the universe, there's always something. Like astrology is just magic. There's always something that it's pointing towards. Even if it's like the rising sign at the time of your appointment is like right here. Or if I have a client who's late, I know that that's like a very hot topic around the Moira press, people being late and timely. But I even have saved charts in my astrology software that are like the actual moment of this reading because it was 8 minutes late. They were 16 minutes late, something like that, where I know the universe was trying to push the button on something and really bring my eye to something, or the energy. I have a reunion chart with one of my old mentors and she was running late, and I was watching it because the moon just kept moving ever so slightly. And I was like, it's going to come in on the midpoint of our Mercuries. I can feel it. And sure enough, she logs in and it's at the midpoint of our Mercuries. I was like, that was bizarre. I guess I knew exactly. I could have gotten up and gotten a snack, but
You're so funny.
oh, it's a good
Is
one.
there anything else that we want to like make sure we hit on this topic? Or are there any questions that we might need to make turn into future existential side quests?
We totally had a question. Oh, Andy just said, well, Jay-Z said the person should have been on time. Yes, maybe they should have been on time, Jay-Z, as part of the production team at Moira Press. That will be the message. I think anytime we take focus off the client, this is Andy, we should be very purposeful about it. The reading is about them. Yeah.
I love that. And like, what does that purposefulness look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like our main teacher of all time, telling stories, telling hypothetical stories, telling stories about other clients, telling stories that frame the energy so that the person really understands what you're talking about. I think those can be super beneficial, but yes, for sure. You got to make sure you're keeping it focused on the client. As a Leo sun, I definitely want you focused on me if I'm coming to you for a reading.
Right. And I think if you do really resonate or find a lot of similarities with that person, it might, even if you are sharing like hypothetical stories or they were informed by your life, like it is helpful to like introduce them as hypothetical stories or like to decenter yourself so that you don't risk becoming the center of that reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know,
like that, making it hypothetical just
right.
to.
And I think another, like what Andy just said, it makes me think about, like I've been through a divorce and I've had clients who also have experienced divorce, and I don't talk like every divorce is different. It's like it's like you can say like, oh, I've been through that. That's like, I know it's a big life change, but there's very different circumstances. We don't need to get into those specifics. And it doesn't come, I know sometimes people are like, but I want to be relatable, or I don't want, like, you don't want your client to feel like they're alone. And there's ways to validate without like like saying like, oh, I totally get what you're going through, because you, like, again, you don't, like, every divorce is different, or every like even the way someone experiences like the death of a parent is different. And so just be really careful with like, I totally get it. That's like a risk.
It's so funny because this could be a whole other episode, but the idea of community. And are we community for our clients? We're very much community when we're with other astrologers and things like that. And healing happens in community a lot of times, whether it's someone newly divorced, finding community and comfort in talking to other people who have experience being divorced, maybe more longevity. But there's so many different healing modalities, healing paths that involve heavy community involvement. So when we try to say, like, we are not your community, here are some resources that you might find helpful for, divorced women over 40. Here's a Facebook group for you, or, something else, where it's like, I don't want to become the end all be all. I don't need to be your guru of how to move through this. I'm only here for you for 90 minutes to give you, or 60, however long your sessions are, to give you this information. And then I empower you to move about your life with this added insight.
That's really interesting too, because of like if the astrologer, like if you really like a client like that, where should we be their community? But it's like where, in another world, we'd be friends.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like you shouldn't be ending the session with like, oh, let's be friends. Or, it's like you can just be really like, oh, I really bonded with this person, and
Mhm.
like what the implication is there.
That
And
was such a tricky topic for me early on in consulting in general, in the adoption world, but also in the astrology world, is like you're talking about really deep
right,
stuff sometimes. And then you want to stay in touch. Like, wow, this person really resonated with me on my deepest, darkest areas, my shadows, my everything. Like, what an asset they would be to be a friend. And I remember saying yes to somebody in the beginning, like, okay, I guess you can just send me a text message. And it got to the point where I had to reel it back in, and it kind of spoiled our future together. Like, we can't really work together now because I had to set a boundary after being really blurry about it. So,
right. No, and I can see that like with people I've become friends with post starting to practice professionally, or dating. It's I know their chart, but I do take some. I like don't really pour into or give a reading, because I'm like, I want to get to know this person, especially like I want this to be a fourth house or a seventh house relationship. And
mhm.
then the reading will come later. And like they'll be like, oh, I want you to read this. I'm like, I really want to make sure I don't want to position myself as an astrologer. I want to position myself as Kimber. And
Mhm.
it makes me think too, where specifically with like someone you live with or like a partner, when Andy's talking about like tracking transits to your partner chart, but also making like helping your partner get into astrology so that you can still maintain that like equal relationship, and like they can kind of become practitioners of their own chart, and like
Mhm.
learn that, it's like you're not just in this seat of educating them on everything about their birth chart, because like that makes sense at the beginning, and like you're not going to meet everyone who's already into astrology, but it's just how important it is to maintain that equal feeling that we want in like a seventh house relationship.
For sure. Yes, good point. Equal feelings. That's exactly what the house of partnership is supposed to be about. We had a couple more. Oh, Jensen, as astrologers, do we need to be relatable to our, that we can end on this? Do we
Yeah.
need to be relatable to our clients in order to be helpful? That's a great question. As a practitioner, I would say no, but
Hmm.
as a person who has gone to an astrologer and felt that they were very unrelatable, straight from the first few sentences they casually said to me, it shut me down to the rest of the reading. So I think we need to maybe be conscientious about what it is that we're putting out there for them to relate to. This person
Yeah.
I saw the day the Queen of England died, and this astrologer was very affected by the death of the Queen, and I have nothing to do with the Queen. So her immediately starting out saying how activated she was by the news of the morning, and can you believe it? I was like, we are not on the same page in life. This is making me feel like we're not going to be on the same page through this reading.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think too, just like it kind of goes back to understanding what's important to your client.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think if the client like bids for connection, or just like if the client is like so like seems like they're soliciting this for this relatability, I think you can like give that without taking up too much space. But I don't think going into it being like, oh, I can relate, and like leading with that makes any sense. But it's like some clients that is important, and then
Mm-hmm.
some clients it's not. Like I know a lot of EMDR therapists have been through EMDR themselves, and it's helpful to know if as an EMDR patient that your therapist has gone through that experience, but they don't share their EMDR, like what they were going through EMDR for. And so
Yeah.
there's like this relatability. I feel like you can relate, like we experience astrology just like our clients do. Like we're humans,
Mhm.
without sharing like details that actually don't add to their session?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good question. I would like feel like so many more doors can open from that. But I know we
So
need to
many
pause
side
probably
quests.
over time.
Yeah, we're already over time. Andy's probably like, I'm Lunas, ladies. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for being
Yes.
here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being in the chat with us. If you want to connect with us, our contact information is in the description, both our websites. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can see our different playlists as we continue to have more episodes. And then, Jenna, do you want to talk about next week's episode, what we're going to be covering?
Yeah, next week we're going to be exploring archetype outliers. So, a brand new topic we're bringing to you all in 2026.
I know. So, I hope everyone has a happy new year, and we will talk to you next week.
Awesome. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.